now I have Trent James on the line. He is the CEO of the Hex Fight Series. First of all, thanks, Trent, for taking the time. And I'd like to talk about Hex Fight Series 7. There was a lot of viewership to do with that event. I think on a Facebook live stream, it exceeded over 100,000 viewers, which is outstanding. Why do you think the Hex Fight Series is so popular now? Like, what has made it so successful?
Well, I don't think it's just the fact that Hex is popular. I think the sport itself is growing, which is giving us and our neighbouring promotions a lot more viewers. I do feel that Hex is a standout promotion in the country in comparison to the other ones, and I think that's because we put so much resources into production. We don't just. It's not just about matching fights. It's about building a promotion and proper foundation to allow ourselves to expand.
Mm-hmm. And with the fighters that you're starting to attract now, do you find that more and more fighters are becoming interested in being involved with Hex?
Yeah, definitely. So originally, when we first started Hex, it was a pretty hard task to put a card together. But really finding it easy now, we probably get 50 plus new fighters approach us each show about trying to get onto the card. So it's definitely growing for us in that department.
Mm-hmm. And what is it like to work with different mixed martial artists? Because there's a lot of personalities, a lot of egos in mixed martial arts, which is a good thing in terms of the competitiveness of the sport. But you also have, people who are quite shy, who just focus on their fight, people who are quite loud. How have you managed to deal with fighters in that regard?
So I can adapt to almost anyone. I think probably my strongest attribute is people person skills.
Mm-hmm.
I've got I can adapt to anyone's behaviours or personalities. And look, there's obviously some hard people to deal with in terms of fighters, and there's some really easy ones. I think the hard ones is basically due to not being educated correctly on how to obtain themselves fights or maintain a relationship with a promotion. So I do try and give some educational lessons or advice to fighters on how to maintain relationships with people, because obviously that's the most important thing, is holding a healthy and steady relationship with people.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely been some fighters that I've decided that I wouldn't use again, or definitely not at this stage because of that reason. But generally, I like to try and work with people as much as possible,
mm-hmm.
and tailor, what we do to accommodate them the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Hex Fight Series 7 was a huge success, not just in terms of the broadcast itself, but the commentary team. I thought they did a really outstanding job covering the event. And because there's so many matches across different divisions, how did you scout the commentary team for the Hex Fight Series?
How Hex works, and which is a little bit different to a lot of other promotions, is if you look from Hex 1 to Hex 7, we've on a majority scale, we've used the same guys throughout. If you keep using different guys in terms of commentary, in terms of production, lighting, you can never tailor it properly to the way you want.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to get some real ground on guys being able to work the way we want them to work.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the commentators, one of the commentators does a lot of Fox Sports stuff, and it got a very good knowledge of jiu-jitsu and MMA. And then Frank Barker, he's a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and got his own school, so he was an obvious pick.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the upcoming fighters now that are coming up through your banner, the Hex Fight Series, who do you think is really standing out at the moment? Obviously, one I can pinpoint now is Aiden Aguilera. He looked absolutely outstanding at Hex Fight Series 7 and has a lot of talent. Who do you think are the rising prospects in the Hex Fight Series?
So there's definitely a few guys that I find that are super talented. I think all the guys that we use, other than the guys that are a little bit inexperienced, and that's probably the only reason. But I guess the biggest ones would be fighters like Kit Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
6-2 now. He's 2-0 on Hex, and fighting high caliber guys. He's had a gym change when he first came to Hex. He's come to a new gym in Frankston called Pro Fitness MMA, and I think he's definitely a rising star, and he's going to make it. He's a young kid, super talented in every aspect of MMA. We've got Jim Crute. He's an obvious standout, 3-0 with Hex now. And then you've got Jordan Cameron coming through Hex Fight Series. He's 5-0 now, and he's going to be fighting for the Hex featherweight title on this next show.
Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could tell me a bit more about the path to Hex or the road to Hex. So from my understanding, it's a platform for, amateur fighters to get some really good experience and make their way up. Similar to, I don't know if you know of this show, but like The Ultimate Fighter in the UFC. So they have something where fighters can go on the show, develop their skills, and hopefully get a contract in the UFC. Is it similar? Is the path to Hex similar in that it may lead to a contract to a Hex Fight Series 7 or like one of those big events?
Yeah, look, it definitely is, but it's not. That's not its sole purpose. The purpose is that if you look at places like America, for example, they've had guys that are fighting over there have had 10 plus amateur fights before they turn pro.
Mm-hmm.
So guys over here in Australia maybe having one or two, and they turn pro. Some guys aren't even having an amateur fight. And you match. That's why Australia isn't doing as well as it could be or should be in promotions like the UFC, because they're matching a guy that's 4-0 against another guy that's 4-0, for example. But really, the guy from America's had 14 fights, although they haven't all been professional.
Mm-hmm.
So Australia's lacking grassroots promotions. So that's why I started it, to build proper foundation in our amateur scene, so guys can be more competitive at a higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think experience is invaluable to have in the octagon, especially when you're facing more experienced fighters. It would definitely play a role. And just
the only difference between professional and amateur, in my eyes, is the crowd. So, you're under bigger lights when you fight professional. In terms of fighting an opponent, I don't feel that it's much different between amateur and pro. So what we're trying to do, and it wasn't as much of a success as what we planned, but moving forward it will be, is give the amateurs the professional feel by fighting on path to Hex.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that would definitely improve the system itself. And I think it's really good that the Hex Fight Series is advocating for the development of MMA in Australia, because like you said, before the Hex Fight Series, before Hex, there wasn't really, a huge Australian promotion, but now I think that, Hex is growing to become that. And on that note, do you plan for Hex to mainly have Australian fighters on future cards, or are you always open to overseas fighters?
Always open to internationals.
Yeah.
On every show, we've had an international or more,
mm-hmm.
And things aren't going to change. We're looking at expanding interstate and overseas. I've been dealing with India for the last probably 12 months
mm-hmm.
about trying to set up something over in India and Korea as well. So, we're definitely going to expand. I just want to build the right foundation here first. And with Hex, the reason why it started is because how poorly the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So we, I thought how hard could it be, but I soon realised that it's not as easy as it looks. But we persevered, and we're still going strong. And we hope that we've lifted the bar for MMA within Australia.
Mm-hmm. And as yourself in a CEO position, what do you think makes a good CEO promoter of MMA? Because in some promotions you have some promoters who, are not the best in terms of dealing with other people. They do it a lot for, the money, personal gain. So you mentioned your people managing skills. Do you see that as a key part of your role as the CEO of Hex?
I think it's one of many. I think that, obviously building relationships is important, but I think that there's a few things that I do differently. I feel like I can see things that could go wrong before they happen,
mm-hmm.
which prevents things from happening, going wrong. And putting the fighter first, looking from the fighter's perspective, I've fought myself. That's the difference between myself and promotions like the AFC, that, those guys have never had a fight before. So it's really hard to be able to look from a fighter's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I can look, would I have liked that when I fought? Would that have worked for me? So having the ability to be able to do that separates us from other promotions.
Mm-hmm. And with future Hex events, so do you anticipate, as you were saying to me before, that the events itself could move offshore in the future instead of just being hosted in Melbourne, or is that more the fighters?
Our base will always be in Melbourne,
mm-hmm.
But we definitely, by 2018, we would have done a show overseas.
Mm-hmm. And that's where you see, the growth of Hex itself. And
you find that any business, they grow too fast, too quick, they fall over. They become too top-heavy.
Mm-hmm.
We're just making sure that we build strong enough foundation here in Melbourne before we decide to try and expand and potentially fall over.